This is part of a series of virtual forums that we're holding with candidates for Boise School Board. I'm Kevin Richert. I'm a reporter with Idaho Education News, and we're pleased to be partnering with the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce on these forums. You're going to be hearing now from the two candidates in race number 4. This is a race for one 2-year seat on the Boise School Board. The candidates are Shiva Rajmanzari and Steve Schmidt. And I'm going to have each of you take a minute to tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your background and how that background would inform your process as a trustee. Shiva, why don't you get started?
Me, Kevin. Like you said, my name is Shiva Rajmandari. I use he, him pronouns. Boise schools really made me who I am. You know, I attended Highlands Elementary, North Junior High, Treasure Valley Math and Science Center, and currently I'm going to be a senior at Boise High School. And I'm the first student running for the Boise School District Board of Trustees, and hopefully soon to be the first student trustee on the board. And I'm running because I believe that students deserve a voice in our education. I believe that, student voice, we have a lot to bring to the table. And I think that student input has been left out of a lot of board decisions to the detriment of our school district. And so, I'm a runner, I'm a teammate, I love Boise schools, and I'm excited to be in this campaign.
Steve.
My name is Steve Schmidt, as you mentioned, and I'm a father and a husband, and I'm an engineer by degree. I think one of the things specifically about my background that makes me well suited to this is that in my engineering training, I've learned the value of really being able to look at situations and problems that need to be solved or issues that need to be addressed. And I've learned the value of having multiple perspectives in helping to make those decisions. And so I bring that to the school board. I'm definitely invested in Boise. My wife and I have lived here. She's lived here a few years longer than me, but I've been here for almost 20 years. And our boys attend the schools in the district. And we want to see this district succeed because ultimately public education is critical for our entire community, not just for the students that are going through the school district now. And so one of the things that I believe is critical in our school board is that we have rational, well-informed decisions that are made by the board. And so my background as an engineer, that different perspective, and my vested interest all drive me to help contribute on the board and to our community in this way. And I'm currently a trustee, but am running to be reelected and look forward to continuing serving on the board.
Okay. But thank you both. Let's dive into some questions now. And Steve, I'm going to start with you on this one. What do you consider to be the top priority facing the Boise School District, and how would you approach it?
Yeah, I think that really there are multiple areas that our district is working on currently, but if I had to pinpoint one, I would say that student achievement is ultimately what our objective is. Our goal at the district is to prepare every student for citizenship, career, and college. And in order to do that, they need a high quality education. And I think how we measure that high quality education, there are different metrics that could be used for that. But ultimately, we want to see that all students are learning and progressing through their education here and ended up with graduation, and not just graduating with checking the box, but actually being able to be prepared and move forward. And so I think there's multiple ways that that's being addressed, but one that I'm particularly interested in, and then I will be following up with the administration on as we go forward, is they are renewing their focus on really student-centered learning and how the connection between an individual in the school and the student can make the difference in that student's life. So whether that's a teacher, a principal, or one of the other staff members at the schools. Those one-on-one connections are critical to so many aspects, whether it's success in the class, and even helping to identify kids that are starting to struggle, whether that's emotionally or mentally, or in other ways. So having that connection helps the school start to recognize that, and can help use the resources that we have in the district to meet the needs of each of those students, and ultimately ended up with a student that's successful and able to progress through their education and graduate.
Shiva.
Yeah, and I totally agree that student achievement is very important. But my role on the board, I think, is bringing this student perspective that has really been left out. And for that, I think that the biggest priority for our school district should be mental health. Right now, across the country, our schools are facing a mental health crisis. You can say it's because of the pandemic, but really, it's this is a long time coming. And in our classrooms, we don't have the resources we need to address that. I go to Boise High, and our student to counselor ratio is 150% of the national recommended student to counselor ratio. And because of that, students, aren't getting what they need as far as mental health resources. So on the board, I want to hire more mental health professionals, more school counselors, and make mental health more of a centerpiece in our school community. And I think that's kind of a long-term goal. That's going to take time. Another issue that is facing our school district in the short term, I think, is teacher retainment and hiring. And I think that a lot of that comes from the state level, but we need to make sure that our teachers feel welcome in school, as well as our students feel included, and feel like they belong in our public schools. And that's what I hope to do on the board.
Okay. Well, let's stay there, and I'm going to start with you on this question, Shiva. You talked about teacher retention. That's something we've been talking about in these other forums as well. What do you think is the most important thing that the Boise School Board can do tangibly to support teachers?
Yeah, there's a great thread going around like Facebook and Instagram where it's like, we don't have a teacher shortage. What we have is a shortage of respect for our teachers and a shortage of funding for our teachers. There are plenty of qualified teachers, and our school district has some of the best teachers in the state, possibly in the country. So a lot of that comes from the state level, right? We need to be funding our schools adequately. I'm a big proponent of the Quality Education Act. I collected signatures with Reclaim Idaho. I knocked on doors, and I'm excited to see corporations and the wealthiest of Idahoans pay their fair share, so that our teachers, so we can retain high quality teachers and have classroom resources for our students. Beyond that, I think that it's important that our district leadership stand up for our teachers when they're under attack. Idaho is the center of this big campaign to undermine public education as a whole. And I think that is super important that, as board members, as members of the administration, we ensure that teachers know that we have their backs, because our community does have their backs. And we need to make sure that teachers aren't intimidated to being in schools. I saw this, terrifying statistic where it's like almost half of teachers are considering early retirement right now. And that's because, that demonstrates kind of a culture issue. We need to make sure that teachers feel supported, feel like they have the freedom to teach, and feel like they have the resources to do so.
Steve. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I agree, Shiva, that teacher value is critical. And one way to show that is through pay and benefits packages. But another important aspect is feeling valued and supported in your work environment. And so whether those attacks or threats, if you will, on our teachers are coming from the society in general, or even in some cases we've seen it recently with parents, very vocal parents, with disagreements over how things are being handled. We need to make sure that as a district we are able to hear both sides of that. We need to be able to hear the parents, and work together to come to a resolution for what's going to be ultimately what's in the best interest of the students and the teachers. And I think when we talk about supporting teachers or educators, I think the state has made a lot of progress in using the career ladder as a funding mechanism to help motivate that. But I agree that we're still short on really valuing the teachers and the importance that they play in the classroom, because they are the ones who are impacting our students the most during the school day. And so we need to make sure that we're continuing to support them and in all of those ways, whether it's financial or through benefits, and then supporting them in their roles as they're facing the challenges that they face as educators.
Kevin, could I respond to that really quick?
Yeah, just quickly.
Yeah, I think that what terrifies me about what we've seen over the last couple of years is that it's really a select group of parents, a small vocal minority that are, intimidating our teachers and kind of shaping the way that we make educational policy. And I think we saw that with the book bans in Nampa, and I think we see that with, some of the organizations that have actually endorsed you, Steve. And I think it's really important to stand up to bullies. My teachers fight for me every day in the classroom and outside of the classroom as well. And I think that teachers deserve that same, group that will advocate for them, whether it's the union, but also trustees, when it comes to fighting extremism in our state.
Those are topics we're going to get to here in the next few minutes, but I want to start with you, Steve, on this one. Let's talk a little bit about pandemic protocols. And I don't want to talk as much about what's been done in the past 2 years. I mean, I think that's part of the answer, because it gives us a sense of how you've approached it so far, how the district has approached it so far. But I want to get a sense of how you approach it in the future. If the science suggests that we're in the middle of another surge, and the science suggests that maybe it's time to revisit some of the pandemic protocols that we've had over the past couple of years, whether it's COVID or something else, how would you approach that?
Yeah, I can speak for myself personally, and then also talk a little bit about how I think that our administration needs to continue supporting it. And actually, at our board meeting last night, we just renewed the health and safety plan, which really focuses on our response to those kind of infectious diseases. From a personal standpoint, I look at multiple factors regarding our community's ability to respond to this pandemic. And Kevin, I know you mentioned you didn't want to talk a lot of the past response, but I think it's key.
I just wanted the answer to be more, looking to.
Yeah, I think it's key in helping understand where I think we should go forward.
Exactly.
And what we've seen in the past is that during certain phases of the COVID pandemic, we saw hospitals that were their census were very high with patients, and at different variants of the COVID, as our community faced different variants of the COVID virus, we saw different severity levels of illness, even to the point that the current level is still significant. But it has such a broad effect on different people. One of the other things that's important to me as I look at how we should respond is our ability to have teachers in the classroom. So if we've got teachers who are out and we're not able to fill those with qualified substitutes, then that definitely plays a role in how we can address this going forward. I think so. Those are a few of the factors that I personally look at when we're trying to decide how should we respond to this. Ultimately, our goal needs to be on providing quality in-classroom education, I believe, for our students, because that's what we see statistically shows the best performance and has the biggest impact on student achievement and student growth and learning. So I think that we need to continue, like we talked about in our health and safety plan. We need to continue to educate and reinforce good hygiene habits, whether that's physical hand washing habits, but also respiratory habits. How are we uh, reinforcing those and training those at all levels between our staff and our students? And then um, we as a community need to recognize that this is more than just an individual rights issue, that this is a how can we support our community as a whole. And so one of the aspects of our illness policy that we've had for some time now is when you personally or when I personally experience symptoms beyond the norm, how do I respond to that? I think in the past, and even as a part of maybe our American culture, it's been I'm going to go tough it out, right? It's just a cold. I can tough it out. I can go and continue on. But I need to recognize that that has an impact on the other people around me and our classroom. And so I think that it's important that each of us we play a role in supporting our community in this and um, making decisions that are in the best interest for ourselves and also for those around us.
Shiva, you're on the ground as a student. You're also a prospective trustee candidate. How would you approach pandemic protocols in the future, depending on what the science?
Yeah, and I largely agree with Steve that you need to look at the past to kind of look at the future, and I really do support the way that the board has handled the COVID-19 pandemic and other health and safety related issues. Following CDC guidelines, following Central District Health guidelines to keep families and students safe and keep students in school is really important. And so I agree with Steve. When it came to having teachers, I remember when half of my teachers were out, and a lot of we didn't even have subs. We'd have to go to the cafeteria. That was not a good pandemic approach. And so if we have to wear masks, for example, to keep students or to keep teachers safe and in the classrooms, I think that's really important that we do so. But more than that, I think that what the pandemic created was, a lot of compounding issues. This mental health crisis, this inclusivity, issues with, who's wearing a mask and when. And I think it's important to make sure that students feel accepted as their true selves, no matter, whether or not they're wearing a mask in the classroom. Everyone should be free to kind of express themselves in the way that they want. And I think that's super important. That's something that I've seen in my classes is almost this hierarchy come out with, who's wearing their mask and how are they wearing that. And I think that's something that we have to combat, as well as, the mental health effects of, being on lockdown for 3 months and, being isolated from human contact. I think that's super important. So I support, following CDC, Central District Health guidelines, and checking in with hospitals and seeing those hospitalization rates. And I think in this stage of the pandemic, it's really important that we just have options for students. You can wear a mask if you want to, and we're going to create a culture that is accepting of you regardless of whether you're wearing a mask, where people aren't asking, hey, why are you wearing a mask? And you have to tell them, my mom is going through chemo. That's not something that should need to be shared. You should just be welcome to wear a mask if you'd like to. Having those online options that increase flexibility, night classes, reduced student to teacher ratios so that we have smaller class sizes and can help prevent the spread of communicable diseases. I think that's super important. And I think going forward, I think the health plan and the steps that the district has taken leave us in a really good place for next year and, the following decades to respond to communicable diseases in the community.
Let's shift gears, but I want to stay with you, Shiva, to start on this question. All-day kindergarten. The Boise School Board adopted all-day kindergarten to the point where almost all kids are going to be in all-day kinder this fall. Very few are going to be in part-time. How do you assess all-day kindergarten, and how would you look at it going forward? How would you measure whether this is working or not?
Full-day kindergarten is the key to kindergarten literacy rates and giving students, a head start on achieving an education, a high-quality education. And so I applaud the board for setting up that full-day kindergarten system. I remember, when I was in kindergarten, I remember how stressed my mom was with this lottery system and whether or not, we're going to get in. And that shouldn't be the case. All students should have equitable access to kindergarten, regardless of how much money they make, regardless of what school they're attending. And I'm super supportive of that. One thing that is going to greatly benefit students across the state when it comes to full-day kindergarten is the Quality Education Act. And I'm, very excited about the prospects of this funding that can then be used by districts across the state, including the Boise School District, to maintain that and make sure that's sustainable. Because looking at the district's plan for funding full day kindergarten, there's some question marks coming, 2023, 2025. How are we going to maintain that funding and ensure that students have access to that program? And I think that's super valuable. As far as, can my student go to half day kindergarten? I support that parent choice on that. When your students are young, I think that's up to you. And I support the way that the district has handled that, leaving a few half day kindergarten options for parents to enroll in if they so choose.
Steve.
Yeah, I think when we talk about measuring the success of all-day kindergarten, we've had a little bit of a sample of that because we did have some schools that were doing all-day kindergarten as well as half-day, and we were able to look at the test scores and also get feedback from the teachers who taught those kindergartners in first grade. And so I think as an engineer, I like data. Data, I think, is helpful to be able to measure things, but it's difficult to use data alone and test scores alone as an evaluation mechanism. So I would say that one of the things that I've talked about with the administration as a board member is, yes, let's look at the data, the test scores, and those are important. We need to see those progressing in the right direction. But how are we also making a true assessment of other things that we can't measure on a specific test? And I think the significance of that comes in that relationship with the teacher. The teachers have the interaction with the students, and they're the ones that can see and really have a good sense for how students are progressing in that. So I think it's a combination of looking at our IRI scores and other assessments and feedback from the teachers as to the students' progression.
And to clarify quickly, you supported going forward with the plan.
I did, yes, absolutely.
Okay, let me start this question with you, Steve, as well. A lot of the education debate, nationally, statewide, even at the local level, has been centered on topics like critical race theory and indoctrination. And the Boise School District was subject to a public records request on this topic about a year ago. Do you see any validity to these concerns?
I guess, first of all, I just want to make it clear that indoctrination is not something that we are doing in the Boise School District. Again, our focus is on a high quality education. As a part of our policy, we do say that we will discuss and teach kids at an appropriate level for their age on controversial topics so that they can learn the value of evaluating facts and making decisions about those things. I guess another thing that I want to say at the beginning is that we strive to have high quality, highly educated, capable educators in our classrooms. And we expect those teachers, those educators, to be presenting information in a way that is honest and fair so that it's a presentation of information and an education, not a bias or an indoctrination. So I think there's absolutely, as a parent, there is absolutely validity in being aware or asking the questions. Is there something going on in our classrooms? As a trustee and working with the administration, we are not indoctrinating people in tenets of critical race theory or things like that. I think critical race theory is interesting because I think it's difficult to even come up with one specific definition of what critical race theory is, but yeah, I think that, and I definitely support parents being involved in what the curriculum is, being aware of it. We should be aware of it. And the Boise School District has a policy that if a parent has concerns about what's being taught, that they always have the option to request that their student not participate in that. And we have mechanisms for that. But I think it's also important to realize that a large percentage of the students that we serve maybe don't have the support that I give to my kids, or maybe Shiva, the support that you had as a student. And so we as trustees are expected to be looking out for the best interest of all students, and definitely making sure that we're providing a fair education that presents facts and information and not in a biased or indoctrinating way is important.
Shiva.
I agree with that, Steve. And I think, some of this conversation about critical race theory and indoctrination really wasn't about what was happening in our schools, but about, these multi-million-dollar nationally funded campaigns to undermine public education and educators as a whole. I remember, some of my teachers were subject to some of those really records request threats from, some of the people at the highest levels of state government. And what felt so isolating was that our district leadership wasn't there with me and my fellow students standing up for our teachers during that time when they were under attack. I remember one day walking into English, and we had an assignment, and half of the assignment was redacted, like with black Sharpie. It read like a CIA document, and I wonder what we are missing in our education because of those attacks, because of those unfounded attacks to intimidate our teachers and make people shy away from teaching the curriculum and teaching the facts. And so I think it's really important that we have strong leadership that supports our teachers in the legislature, in the community, and communicates that indoctrination is not what happens in the Boise School District, and that we have some of the best teachers in the state, and they know how to teach. And honestly, for me personally, those attacks were undignifying and disempowering to students. Saying that we as students are, subject to indoctrination, that we can be easily convinced as to, falsehoods is a dramatic underestimation of the intelligence of Boise School District students and the teaching of our educators.
Let's hone this down a little bit further. And Shiva, you alluded to it earlier. NAMPA's decision earlier this year regarding the 22 books that were banned from the libraries. I'm trying to get a sense from both of you. Do you envision a situation or a scenario where, as a trustee, you could see making a similar decision about removing books from a library?
I stand firmly opposed to book bans of any type in the Boise School District. I think that just like, these unfounded claims of indoctrination, a small minority of parents attacking our students with these extremist remarks is really undignifying to our students and our teachers. And I think that, America was really founded on this principle of open access to information. Why should we hide things from our students if we have nothing to hide? And so I stand firmly opposed to book bans. I think that, free access to information is the cornerstone of a democratic civil society. And on the school board, I will refuse to back down to parents. And we already do have policies in place that parents can request information, as to what is being taught in our schools, and they can request alternative content. But a small group of parents shouldn't be deciding what all of the students are learning. And one thing with regards to the NAMPA book bans, which really scares me personally, as a senior student taking AP Literature, which is a college board class that students across the country are taking, is 3 of those books they banned in NAMPA are actually part of that college board curriculum. So those book bans are now disadvantaging those students compared to their peers nationally when it comes to that particular course, that English class. And I think that the primary role of the Boise School District is to ensure that our students are adequately prepared to compete in the workforce with students across the country. And banning books is not the right way to do that.
Steve, last word to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So I agree that with what Shiva said, that we have mechanisms in place in our district for people to evaluate the curriculum, and if a parent has concern about what's being taught, there's a way to find an alternate curriculum for that specific topic. When it comes to specific book bans, we also have a process by which parents can go through and cite a specific book or material that they feel is inappropriate. And I think the the plan and the policy that we have in place today is an appropriate mechanism for that. So as a trustee, I don't expect that I will be in a situation where I will be bringing books to say we are going to ban these. But I do think that it's important that as a part of continuous improvement, that we always be reviewing. Is this age appropriate? Is this material the right material to have at this time in these schools? And so I think our policy allows that right now. And specifically because part of the review of that takes place at the school first, at the school level. So working with the principal, the other administrators that are there, also involving community or parent members in a team to review this particular material. And then that team makes a decision. If that decision is, if somebody wants to appeal that decision, then it can come before the board and the board can make a decision on that. And so I think that that's an appropriate mechanism for review to make sure that we have appropriate materials in the schools for the district. But I wouldn't, I don't, your question was, do I see myself in a situation where I would be bringing these? I don't see myself bringing books to ban, but I would welcome a review of the material to make sure that we are continuing to have age appropriate material in the schools and opening that up to that team review of the educators and the parents to help guide in that decision.
Well, I want to thank you both for taking the time. Shiva Rajbandari and Steve Schmidt, thank you both for taking the time to answer these questions. And thank you both also for taking the time to respond to our online questionnaire, our written questionnaire. You can find these candidates' responses at idahoednews.org. We cover a lot of topics in that questionnaire that we didn't get to in this forum, so check that out as well. These are the two candidates running in race 4 for Boise School Board. They are vying for 1 2-year seat on the board. The election is September 6th. If you've been watching, you're probably already inclined to vote, but if you are on the fence, by all means, get out there and make your voice heard. Thank you to the candidates, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks, Steve.
Yep, likewise. Thanks, Shiva. Thank you, Kevin.